Welcome back, I'm here. And tonight we are going to be taking a look at another scary story from Reddit. So if you're ready for bed, then let's get into it. This story comes from a user who begins, I don't travel much anymore, but when I did, I would stay at cheap roadside motels. Back in the early 2000s, I was traveling between Texas and Illinois. On the way, I stopped overnight in Little Rock, Arkansas. It was late, like past midnight, and there was a huge storm out. Thunder, lightning, hail, the works. The motel was right off the highway and looked pretty dodgy, but it had vacancy signs lit up, so I figured why not. As I pulled up to the office, there was a car there with its hazard lights on, but no one in sight. I knocked on the door, and after a few minutes, a woman finally opened it. She told me they were having problems with their phone line, and the power was flickering on and off due to the weather. I told her I had a reservation, and she said, "Oh, sorry, love. I just got disconnected. Let me get that fixed." She went outside to a phone on the wall and tried calling someone. Then she came back in and said they didn't have my reservation. I wasn't surprised at all, but I was tired, so I just asked how much for a single room. She told me $80, which sounded about right. I paid, and she gave me a key to room 2. When I got to my room, the first thing I noticed was a weird, musty smell. I laid my stuff down on the table and noticed a big stain on the bedspread. I pulled it up, and underneath it was this huge ass spider. I'm talking the size of the palm of my hand, hairy legs, the whole bit. I killed it with the hairdryer and threw the bedspread back on the bed. I was going to sleep in the car, but the weather was so bad, I decided I may as well try to sleep in the room. As I was getting ready for bed, the lights flickered and died. I walked over to the window and was looking out into the darkness when I heard a voice that said, get out now." I turned around and saw a tall, dark figure standing at the foot of my bed. I screamed and ran for the door. In the commotion, I tripped and fell, scraping my knee pretty good. I didn't care. I just got up and ran to the bathroom and locked myself in there. After a minute or so, the lights came back on, and I cautiously came out of the bathroom to see if anything or anyone was there. Nothing. I guess I could have stayed in there for the night, but I couldn't take the creepy factor of the place. Plus, I had my doubts that whoever owned this place was even insured or licensed to run a motel. I left and slept in my car. The next morning, I woke up and drove off without paying. I know that was wrong, but I just couldn't take the chance of staying another night there. I never went back to that motel, and I haven't stayed in a roadside motel since. So our user is driving around late at night, and he checks into a pretty sketchy motel because it's late and he is tired. I mean, honestly, I think it's probably a good idea to keep driving. But regardless, he ends up getting a room, finds a massive spider in the bed, but decides to stay anyway. I feel like if you find a massive spider in your bed, you should just leave. I don't know. That's me. I would never stay in a room where I knew there was a massive spider living in the bed. I cannot imagine the creepiest thing. Just put your stuff in the car and sleep in the car. There's plenty of room. You can always lay the seats down and just fall asleep. I don't understand why he chose to stay. But regardless, he ended up seeing a creepy figure at the end of his bed and decided to nope right out of there. I don't blame him. That's pretty creepy, and it makes sense that he would want to leave. But some people had some thoughts about this. A user says, the problem with these kinds of stories is that most of us have stayed in crappy motels before. So instead of being scared, we just get annoyed. For example, you say the room smelled musty. What does that mean? Does it smell like old mildew and damp carpet? Or does it smell like old piss and regret? You need to paint a clear picture with your words. Another user says, to be honest, the first part of the story sounds like it was written by an actual 7-year-old. If you're going to write a horror story, you need to write it like you're actually scared. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. Like, I laid my stuff down on the table and noticed a big stain on the bed. I pulled it up, and underneath it was this huge ass spider. Well, the first part of the story, I thought, oh, wow, maybe the kid spilled something on the bed. What was that huge ass spider? But then you described it as this huge ass spider. Don't assume that we already know what you're writing about. So, for example, if you wrote, I laid my stuff down on the table and noticed a big stain on the bed. I pulled it up, and underneath it was a huge tarantula. Then that would be better than saying, huge ass spider. Another user says, yeah, I agree. He also says that a lot of these posts have really lazy writing. For example, it was late, like past midnight. Yeah, exactly how late was it? Was it 12:02 a.m.? Because that's not late. But also, if it's storming, why do you check into a place that's obviously unsafe to stay at? Another user says, if the power is flickering and the phone line is down, Pop should have kept driving. He might have gotten stranded in a storm, but at least he wouldn't have been stranded in a potentially dangerous situation. Also, why didn't he call for help when he saw the ghost? When I read a story like this, I don't buy it until I hear some logical explanation. Maybe there was a person in a dark hoodie, and the author used the word ghost because he didn't want to admit that he made a false accusation. Or maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation, like the closet door was open, and the light was shining through, making it look like there was a person in the closet. All I'm saying is that if he was really scared, he would have called for help. And then this user describes a similar experience they had. They say, I worked a job where I had to drive around all night delivering packages. One night I was delivering a package to a hotel in Fort Wayne, Indiana. After I dropped off the package, I decided to spend the night there instead of driving home in the middle of the night. I parked my car and sat down on the bed, and it started creaking loudly. I was half asleep, so I just thought it was the old building settling. About 30 minutes later, I woke up to the sound of footsteps. I assumed it was my imagination. About 10 minutes later, I heard the same footsteps near my bed. I turned on the light and everything seemed normal. About 10 minutes after that, the footsteps came again, and I heard the distinct sound of someone walking down the stairs. I don't remember if I was scared or just pissed off. I got up and walked out of the room to investigate. No one was there. I checked both the room above and below mine, and there was no one there. I went back to my room, called the front desk, and they said that no one was registered to that room. I packed my stuff and left. I don't know if I'll ever go back to that hotel chain. Well, that's on Creepy Motels for you. But regardless, these stories are scary and interesting and give me all the feels. And if you like this kind of content, be sure to check out more just like this one. Also be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, I've been your host, and until next time, stay safe.